If your husband doesn't turn in when you do at bedtime and you're just kind of laying there by yourself, and feels like there's a disconnect because your schedules are off, it gets pretty lonely. There's not as much intimacy, that's for sure. But is that something you just have to accept? Or can you entice your husband to come to bed at the same time you go to bed, like my guest Lolita did? And could that help make the rest of your marriage happier and more intimate? And how did she do that anyway? Well, let's find out. I'm Laura Doyle, New York Times bestselling author and marriage mentor, and I was the perfect wife, but then I got married. This is the Empowered Wife podcast, where real women tell exactly what they did and said to make their hopeless marriages playful and passionate. First of all, I'd love to know something about you. Have you ever tried to tell your husband that he should come to bed at the same time as you? And if you have, did that work? Or is there something else you did to get him to come to bed at the same time as you? I'd love to see your comments below this video on YouTube. And if you're just listening to the audio and you're not seeing me on YouTube, come on over here to YouTube. Do a search for Laura Doyle. Subscribe to this channel so that you can be part of the conversation in the comments. My guest Lolita's husband would fall asleep on the sofa, and she would lie in bed feeling angry and abandoned. She started practicing the intimacy skills in earnest. In a very short time, she found herself in a peaceful, joyful marriage. Now they're happier than ever. She's going to tell us how she did it so you can do it too. Lolita, welcome to the Empowered Wife podcast. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me and allowing me to be a part of your world mission of ending divorce. I am honored to be a part of it.
I love that. Well, I cannot wait to hear your story. I had a little sneak peek. I read a little bit about it, and it's pretty amazing. But take us back to the times when you felt like it was really a struggle. What was happening in the bad old days?
So I'll give you just a little context, a little peek into our love story. So we met at a wedding, and we were both 13 years old at the time. Our parents were attending. It was a destination wedding, and we were introduced to each other. We were and are very different people. I was kind of a nerdy bookwormy type, and my husband is very sparkly. He's tall and he's athletic. And at the time, I thought it was the most unlikely thing in the world that he would take interest in me. And so we met and we kind of talked a little bit during that wedding weekend. When we had been married about 10 years or so, he told me that day that he met me, he went back to the hotel and told his family, that's the girl I'm going to marry, as a 13-year-old.
Wow.
So we became friends. We were friends through high school, dated a bit toward the end of high school, dated through college, and got married 2 years after college. So by this time, we've known each other 10 years or so.
Yeah.
So now to the bad old days.
Okay.
We got married. My husband had found this beautiful apartment near the beach, which had long been a dream of him, to live near the beach, just like you are. Wanted to live by the beach. So as our first year of marriage present to me, I guess, he got us an apartment by the beach. It was lovely. And very quickly, we found out that living together as a married couple was very different than dating. And we could not agree about much of anything. We argued constantly. And so about 6 months into our marriage, we separated. And he moved back into his childhood home, and I was there in our beautiful honeymoon of an apartment by the beach by myself. And so several weeks went by. Nobody knew what we were doing. Our families were like, what are you doing? But we were just having trouble getting along. And so weeks went by. I really missed him and wanted him to come back. And so he was willing to come back. And he said that we should probably go to counseling, which we did. And the counseling helped us enough that we could be in the same space together, that we weren't constantly arguing. But I knew that we had not made real progress. It felt like we were surviving. We were newlyweds, and it felt like we were just really surviving. That I had not figured out in my mind, that neither of us had figured out how to really be happy for the long haul. But yet we were both really committed to a long-term marriage. Like we wanted to be together and we knew we loved each other, but we just couldn't quite figure out how to make it all work. So we got through that rough patch and we got about the child rearing years. So we're now, in those first 10 years of marriage, we start having children. We have 3 beautiful daughters who are now in their 20s. But back then we started having children and we go about, those years, the child raising years. So we're working, there's daycare, there's lots of laughter in our home, which is great. We had a lot of fun, but the big problem still remained that if we didn't agree on something, then it would start as a minor disagreement and then it would become a big blowout and then we couldn't find our way out of it. So very much like other women on the podcast and those who are part of this community, the Cold Wars would set in, and we would use the busyness of our lives, so the shuttling the kids and their friends and the work and the travel for work and all those things as the distractions from any problems that came up in our relationship. And I did not understand my part in creating tension in the relationship. I just had no idea.
Nobody ever showed you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I just didn't know. And I came to learn decades later that my primary problem was helping, and trying to do everything. So I was trying to be a superwoman. So I did all these things. I went to work at a very demanding full-time job. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the laundry for everybody. I helped with the homework. I shuttled the kids to the sports and the dance classes and the tutors. Even if we went on a long trip somewhere, I would offer to drive, hours and hours and hours to be helpful. And it just,
I'm so tired. I'm tired just hearing that list. That's a long list. Oh, exhausting.
Yeah. And so I just had no idea that all that helping was a problem. Because in my childhood, in my growing up, I had the wonderful, great fortune of being surrounded by lots of long-term couples. My parents, their friends, people at our church, all of these wonderful women who were like long-term wives. And what I saw them do, I grew up in the South. And so what I saw them doing is serving, and doing everything for their families and their husbands. And I thought that was the formula.
Right. Right.
I was just clueless that could be a problem. And so when I thought about what I was doing all these things because I thought that was how you showed love to your husband. But yet I have come to learn and fully believe, what our community believes, which is your husband thinks that's your controlling him. That's your attempt to control by doing all these things. And more importantly, I think it chokes out the space for him to step into the space and be the hero at all, ever. So that was a revelation to me all these decades later. When I realized that I was just trying to control him and control my life and control everything in it. And so very much like in your book, The Empowered Wife, where you do a list of all the ways that you try to control your husband and other people try to control their husbands, I did that same list for myself. So here's some of the highlights. This list could go on for days, but some of the big ways.
Let's hear.
The number one was I told him repeatedly that he spent too much time on the phone. I mean, the cell phone was a major point of contention in our relationship. So he would some days come in from work talking on the cell phone. I would put dinner on the table. He'd continue talking on the cell phone. Dinner would be over. I would clear the table. He's still talking on the cell phone or watching the game on the cell phone. We go out for dinner. He's on the cell phone. I mean, we argued about that constantly. And the more I nagged about it, the less it improved. What a shocker, right?
Ah, right.
So,
Yeah.
I was constantly telling him how to do things, how to drive, where to park, how to do laundry, the cooking, how to clean. Like I was just a walking pinata of information about everything.
The Wikipedia wife, right? Yeah.
Right. Right. I advised him about how to deal with his work situation. So maybe he would come home and tell me that he had a direct report who wasn't doing what they were supposed to do. I would launch into immediately saying, well, you need to coach that person. If they don't respond, you need to discipline them, like the whole thing. Or if it's his boss, he's like, this is what you need to say, and this is how you need to handle it. So just a stream of advice constantly rather than just listening to be supportive. Um, I washed his clothes. I took them to the dry cleaner. I picked them up. I mentioned before, I made the dinner. When he would come home, I'd serve it up on a plate and put it in front of him. He would eat. And when he was done, I would clear the plates and clean up the kitchen. I told him what to eat or not to eat. This one's hilarious to me because I remember like the Great Corn War of one summer because my husband went to the farmer's market and he found corn on the cob that was delicious the first time. But then we found him going to the farmer's market every weekend and bringing more and more corn on the cob. Our freezer was filled with it. He wanted to eat it every day. And so then we started arguing about that. I tried to educate him on the dangers of too much corn consumption.
Too much
How
corn.
starch was not good for his digestive system. And, just all the things about why corn was bad. And the more I tried to educate, the more he chomped on those corn cobs every day. And nothing changed. I also told him he watched too much TV. So my husband, as I mentioned before, is an athletic person. He played all of sports from little league all the way through up through high school. Had an injury which kind of put that off track. But he loves sports. So anything with a ball, he's in. Anything. So he would spend hours and hours watching TV, watching games. He also loves Westerns. So he would watch these old Western movies and I would always say, like, you should fill your mind with more nutritious types of things. Like he likes war movies and gangster movies. He's a man. Yeah, he's a man. So I would always say, like, that stuff you put in for pilot, and he loves the news as well. And all the negative news and all that, it's just not good for you. And the more I pushed, the more hours of TV watched.
This part where I feel like we all married the same man, right? Because there's so much of what you're saying. I'm like, yeah, exactly. So we can carry on. I love this.
Let's carry on. Let's continue. And I explained to him how to parent our daughters. So we are parents to 3 girls.
And you're a girl, and they're girls.
I'm a girl.
Right.
So I explained in great detail how you talk to girls and how you approach girls physically. And my husband's a phenomenal dad. The girls are very close to him. They have shared things with him that they didn't even share with me. They all have a great relationship. In spite of my well-intentioned interventions, their relationship was really good. I encouraged him to go to grad school so he could get a better job. So he was working a job very hard, providing for our family. But I would say, like, you can do more. You're so smart. You can have a better job. You can make more money. And the way you need to do that is to go to grad school. I gave him books about how to improve our marriage. So I would read a book and I would feel like it was really impactful. And I would share it with him and want him to read it too. I told him my opinions on his friends and family members. And I did all these things. I would go through his closet and prune his wardrobe and take out anything he wasn't wearing or, that honestly, that I just didn't feel like should be in there.
Right, right.
Later,
as a favor to him, right? Yeah.
Yes, as a favor to him. So I did all these things. I did some of the same things that you talk about. I bought his underwear and his clothes and his cologne. The funny thing about the cologne here is I was feeling reminiscent of when he was a teenager and he would come to visit and he would wear cologne. He dressed up and he wore cologne. And I was like, I really miss those days when he would wear cologne. Like he still is a very sneaky dresser, but he just stopped wearing cologne over the years. I bought this cologne. I bought it for Christmas one year. It stayed in the packaging. After 6 months, I took it out of the packaging and I started using it as air freshener in our bedroom. So I would clean up and then I would spritz around the room with this cologne. Uh, Hopefully, sending a signal like, it's not for you to use a cologne. That got nothing.
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 All
For
right.
30 long years, I was doing all these things and mistakenly believing that I was showing love to my husband.
And you were pretty much the perfect wife, it sounds like.
I was trying
Yeah, right?
everything I had.
A great wife.
I was trying. And there was always so much to do. And we were doing all of these things. And from the outside looking in, I think if we had been friends at that time, you would have thought this is the ideal, like everything's everything. But I knew that everything wasn't everything because my husband would drop these little comments occasionally and he would say things like, wow, you're always trying to teach me things. And we would just sort of laugh it off and keep going. And then in more somber moments, he might say something like, you don't respect me at all. And I thought, how could that be true? And I would start arguing my case. Like, how can you say that when I do all these things? I take care of this house. I raise our children. I do this. I do that. I cook and I clean and I do all these things for us to have this life. How could you say I don't respect you? I love you. Like we would argue about whether or not I was respected because I just didn't know what it meant to be respected. Just had no idea. So then, this is about the time when so my husband never wanted to argue. He told me early in our relationship, I do not want to argue. I don't like it. It makes me feel like something's really off in our home and I will not do it. I don't want to argue with you. So the way that he would show his discontent is that he started watching TV later at night. Like he'd come on board. And if I think about what it looked like, a little of it in my mind, he'd come over for work. He's talking on the cell phone. Dinner comes and goes. He's on the cell phone and he transitions to the sofa. And then he starts watching a movie or some sports game. And then I'm tired because I got to go to work the next day and I've been ripping and running all day. So I go to bed. I leave him there watching TV. And then I realize 11 midnight that he's not there with me up in our room. He's downstairs with the TV still. And so sometimes he would be actively watching it and other times he would have fallen asleep. He would have fallen asleep. And I just kind of lay there and I'm lonely and I'm sad and I'm confused about what is happening. And yet I've been married a really long time at this point, more than 20 years. And all that time I've been trying to figure out how we can be consistently happy. So my constant thought was like, we have these bursts of happiness. We have this beautiful family. We do these fun things. We go on vacation. We go to these games and dance recitals and choir recitals, all the things that our daughters were in. We have great jobs. We are financially secure. And we have periods of happiness. But then we can't sustain it. That was my overarching, like the nagging problem. I knew we could do it for a short period of time, but I had no clue how to sustain it for the long haul. And it was always kind of like waiting for the next thing that would happen that would throw us off track, like the next disagreement that would throw us off track. And it was just a horrible way to live. I wanted to figure out how to do this long term. That
It does sound stressful, right? It sounds because that need to be back into the blow ups and the Cold Wars, like
yeah,
stonewalling and yeah.
yeah. So I felt trapped. And so one night I was laying in bed and I was just kind of scrolling, looking for answers. And I put in the search, why does my husband not want to come to bed when I go to bed? And your blog came. And I read the blog and immediately I felt like a connection in my soul. And I don't even remember which one it was, but the elements of it were you have the power to change your relationship, even if he doesn't actively participate. You're doing something that's causing a problem. You're helping and you think that's great, but in man speak, that's just controlling. And tomorrow you can start to change this. And I read blog post after blog post until I fell asleep with the phone on my chest reading blog posts. I woke up the next morning with the phone there where I clearly realized I'd fallen asleep reading your blog posts. And that particular night, my husband had not come to bed at all. He was still asleep on the sofa downstairs. And I woke up and I really thought about what I had been reading. And that day I got up and I went downstairs, and what I would usually do is start in complaining to him about, I did not get married to sleep in a bed by myself. What happened? You said you wouldn't do this again. You say you love me, and yet you leave me alone night after night. But that morning, I just got up and I went downstairs, and I think he stirred and realized I was there. And I just went over and made my coffee, and I smiled at him and I said, hey, I have a meeting and I'm going to get out early. So have a great day. And I just went to work.
You smiled at him.
I did.
You know, he did the thing that was driving you nuts.
I did. Because for the first time in such a long time, I felt hopeful. I felt like if I could just give this a little time, that maybe I could maybe I could make a difference here. And so I ordered all the books, every single one you had in print at the time. I went to work. I sat down in my office. I went on Amazon and I ordered every single one for next day delivery. And I went out at lunchtime and I started listening to the podcast. And I started with the first one and I listened to every single one. And to this day, I've heard every single podcast. And little by little, I just started to what I would call dabble in the skills. So I would a little bit in here and there. So self-care, I loved learning about self-care because I thought self-care was like going to get a massage or a manicure, things that actually cost a lot of money. And with 3-year-old daughters, I didn't always have that. So my idea of self-care had lots of time in between where I would do a big self-care event, but then weeks would go by when I wouldn't think about it or intentionally doing it. So your idea in The Empowered Wife of making a list of these things that aren't costly, that are completely within my control, that I can do every day was probably the first thing that really revolutionized my approach to life in general. And so things like even making a big glass of water or walking outside for 5 minutes or a cup of tea or sitting in front of a window like a lazy cat and just letting the sunlight hit me. Okay, those are all part of my self-care toolkit now that I would not have thought about without the Empowered Wife book and being on this journey. So we kind of go along and I start to see immediate results. Things sort of brightened and lightened in our home right away. My husband seemed happier. I was happier. Gratitude was another one that was big for us. I mentioned that I was raised in the South, so please and thank you were really easy for me. It was just being more intentional about thanking my husband every day for big and little things. And I sort of started building upon what was already the culture in our home, which is that of gratitude. So I would send him text, to just say, thank you for taking my car to the shop, or thank you for getting me a car wash membership because I love using my car clean, things like that. Um, so a couple of years into my building my skills, building my use of the enemy's intimacy skills, I remember my husband came home one day and he said, we're going through a reorganization at work, and I think my job may be in jeopardy. And I asked a lot of questions. I could feel the fear just really taking hold. So I asked a lot of questions because we had a lot to learn at that point. We had a house and car payments and two daughters in college that we were paying for their tuition out of state. Um, we just had a lot of financial responsibilities, and I thought, and my husband, was the higher earner. His salary was higher than mine. And so I thought, okay, if that happens, what are we going to do? So I got scared, and then I got real busy advising.
You're going to help them.
I'm going to help him. So the first thing I did is I said, okay, I have a friend who's an employment attorney. I'm going to make an appointment for you. Now, I did that. And much to my husband's credit, he didn't push back. He just said, okay, if you think I should talk to this person, I'll talk to this person. We did that. Got some information. Then the next thing, this conversation about the reorg continued. So the next thing was that he said, I think there's a new leadership team coming in, and I think all the current managers are going to get pushed out. And I'm just, I think this is what's going to happen. So I got even more scared. And I said, you know what you need to do? You need to go talk to the CEO and tell him what a great worker you are, and tell him that you don't think this is right, and tell him that you still want to work here. And my husband said, I'm not going to do that. And I was thinking, why not?
Just try to help them.
I'm just trying to help you. Like, why not? And with every helpful suggestion, my husband just seemed more and more unhappy and distant. And the heartbreaking thing for me is that during this process, these few months leading up to this realization, it was so stressful. Like, there was stress at work. And then my husband would come home and get grilled by me about what was happening in his work, that he actually started suffering some health consequences. So my husband's like this robust, 6'1", he's very tall and athletic man who is very happy-go-lucky, very bubbly and talkative, and it's funny. And he just started fainting at work. So he would just start, feeling lightheaded, and then he fainted a couple of times, which was really scary.
So scary. That is terrifying.
So scary. And then around the same time, he started having some problems with a joint and had to have with one of his joints, and had to have surgery, a major surgery. So I was looking at him and thinking, how can I help? His health is breaking down. He could lose his job. What does this mean to our family? I was terrified.
Terrifying. Yeah, it is terrifying.
And meanwhile, it was as if we were both kind of going into a cocoon. He was sort of going into a cocoon, kind of folding in upon himself, like not wanting to talk. And, I was probing and asking him, how does he feel? And how does all this make him feel? And what's going on inside? And just more of the things that are not natural territory for men. So he did lose his job. The very thing we feared most came.
Worst nightmare. Yeah.
And he immediately started interviewing because he wanted to go right back to work. He's like, these are the things that happen, but I still want to work. We were in our 50s and we still had all these responsibilities. He's like, I want to get right back in there. So he started interviewing. And every time he was getting ready for an interview, he would tell me about the type of, or the business it was. And I would tell him what he needed to say in the interview. I would tell him to research the organization. I would tell him the questions to anticipate because I was currently hiring. And since I was, doing this type of thing, I knew what was on the forefront at that point. Now, my husband was also a manager at a higher level than me in his respective organization, but yet, I just had all this advice. Um, and that went on for a long time. So he would go to these interviews. I would tell him how to prepare. He would come back. I would critique. He would share what he had done in the interview. I would give my critique, like, the Monday morning quarterback kind of thing, and how he could do better the next time. Um, I was in helping overdrive. And so every time he would get into, and I'm talking 20, 30 interviews over months and months of time, where every single time, because he is a great guy and he's very talented and qualified, he'd get like to the last two or the last three, but not be offered the job.
Oh, painful.
Sometimes the people would invite me or require me to come on the site visit with him because they said, they want to make sure the family would buy in if he would select a candidate. So we go through all of that to find out that he was like the runner-up over and over and over and over. And the more he was the runner-up, the more I doubled down on it. Go.
Like, I gotta straighten this out. Yeah.
I gotta straighten this out. So when he had been looking for work for about 18 months, I realized we were right back where we were before I found the skills, which is him falling asleep on the sofa, not talking, this low-level distance between us, him on the phone. I mean, we were right back where we had been before, all the way back. And this is when we've been married 30 years. We went backwards.
Oh, man.
And so at about that time, I looked at my big pile of Laura Doyle books, and I pulled The Empowered Wife off the shelf, and I reread the whole thing page by page again. And I had still been listening to the podcast and thinking I was, like all in it. But I took the book off the shelf and I read it cover to cover again. And that, for whatever reason, was my breakthrough moment. That I said, like, I've either got to do this all in, even though I'm scared, or we're just going to stay on this path, the one we're on.
Where you're sleeping alone in the bed.
My husband's not working.
And your husband's not working. That's right. And all the financial responsibilities on you now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, like it just was it's something I can't even describe, where you have a person who you love, who is getting up every day, putting on a suit and tie, going to their job, and is in charge of so many things, to a person who then loses their job. And then I'm going to work every day and coming home every afternoon to find him some days still in PJs, as I shave, on the sofa, watching TV. Now I know that he was applying for jobs continually, but that scene in my mind of walking through the door,
no woman
realizing day after day after day that this is our reality with no end in sight.
No.
I kind of felt like it took my role. So, cold turkey, I stopped helping. Like, I just...
Like, that pack of cigarettes, like, that's it. I'm done.
That's it.
Okay. Okay.
Because at that point, I pulled out every little nugget of wisdom I had about how to get a job, and none of that had worked. And so I just stopped. And instead, I would come home and kind of sit on the sofa with him and listen. He was doing good self-care, which I think men have a lot better handle on that, because he's a golfer. So he was playing golf and talking to his friends, his family, and he was doing good self-care. And so he was actually doing better than I was. I think mentally, he was doing better. So I would come home, talk to him, figure out what was going on, laugh, smile, try to be light. I really worked on my skill set around being the goddess of fun and light. Like in the old days when we were young. And I got to work committing to my own self-care and really committed to that on a daily basis. The next thing I did is I stopped asking about how we were doing with money. Like I would ask that constantly, well, how are we doing? Um, it's been 3 months. How are we doing? How are we doing? I quit. And instead, I just told him how much I appreciated that he paid all the bills and took care of all the finances. And I texted him regularly to say, thank you so much for being a great provider for our family,
Uh,
even though he still wasn't working.
no, he's not working.
And this was all happening during the pandemic. And so two of our three daughters, the two younger ones, moved back in with us, which put a little bit more financial pressure on it. And just, just more pressure of more people in the space that had been out of the space because they had been out to college and now they come back in. So these skills, these intimacy skills help restore a sense of equilibrium in our home, of happiness and peace, even though it was a very stressful time. And then after 2 years, my husband was looking for a job, got an offer.
Well, yay!
I know. And it wasn't just any offer. It was a great offer for a better job than he had had before.
Um,
But it was a defining moment for me because I can remember the day that he got the offer. I was at work and he called me and he said, what should I do? Should I accept this job? And he asked that question because it was going to require a cross-country move to a very different part of the country than we had ever lived. In a smaller city, we lived in kind of like a bustling suburban area at the time, and this was going to require a move to a very different kind of place. And I definitely had thoughts about it. I'd even dare say opinions about it. But I knew if I whipped out my long list of my thoughts, opinions, the pros, the cons, all the things, that we would go right back to where we had come from. Because that was, just another version of trying to help. And so what I did instead is I said, you have always been a person that has made great decisions for our family. And I trust your judgment. And I will support whatever you decide.
oh,
So, he took the job and we moved cross country on this new adventure. So I'm committed to using these intimacy skills every day. I'm committed to self-care. I show respect to my husband by not helping and offering my advice. Even when he asks me to do things or offer advice, often I will say, I can't. I put a smile on my face and I just say, I can't. And in the beginning, he was like, you can't. And then I was like, I can't. And then we just start laughing and then it would just go on.
it's it's actually super charming. Like as you're doing it right now, like yeah, it's like, super cute. So I can see where that would create. So that would be like endearing to say I can't that way.
I remember to express gratitude to him every day for things big and small. And most importantly, I make space for him to be my hero. It's not that I can't do things for myself, but it's that I have a sincere desire because I love my husband to make space for him to be a hero. And I truly believe anytime the space opens for him to be a hero, he steps into it. And then he feels great. I get to celebrate that. We get to model that in front of our three daughters who are now in their 20s. So hopefully they can see a different way of being than what I thought was the way of being when I first started out as a wife. So it's paying it forward to the next generations in our family. So thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, it's fantastic. Lolita, it's so moving to hear the message that you delivered to him when he got this wonderful job offer and was asking you, should I take it? Like, are you okay with moving? Do you want to move to someplace completely different than where we've been? And for you to just reflect back that he's made great decisions and you trust him to make that decision. What an incredible moment. So, and how did so what's your marriage like now in terms of, well, like, let's just say going to bed?
Well, that has been such a wonderful part of our relationship. Even through all the hard times, we could always find ways to laugh together, and the physical intimacy was always there. Now, what we're talking about now is great quality of that time together, like the tenderness and the talking and the cuddling, just all the whole package is really dreaming now. It's what I always dreamed of as a younger, like what it would be like. And so, yes, that is beautiful. And what I found is this whole experience creates what I think of as a joy spiral. Like the happier I try to make sure that I am, and the more I figure out how to get myself happy when I feel irritable, the more my husband is happy and the more he steps up to find ways to make me happy. So then it's just this great joy spiral over and over that I'm happy and he's happy. He tries to find ways to make me happy. And the environment in our home is just so peaceful and joyful.
Well, I give you all the credit for that because that took a lot of courage to do that at a time when it was really terrifying to relinquish to stop helping, stop being so helpful and create that. What an accomplishment.
And so about a year, just kind of in our last weeks together, some of the things that stick out to me, about a year after my husband got this great job and he's at his job, he's thriving, the business is growing. It's just a wonderful situation and we're settling into our new community. So we're now coming up on at that point, we were coming up on our 35th wedding anniversary. This is last year. And my husband said, I think we need to commemorate this achievement. 35 years of happily being married. And he wanted to buy me a new wedding ring. And I thought it was like so expensive and extravagant. And it was hard for me. Like, I had to work on my receiving muscles. Like, because I wanted to say, my gosh, we just moved cross country. We're just kind of getting back on our feet, blah, 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 blah. But instead I said, I would love. And so he picked out this new wedding.
Wow. It is gorgeous. Let me see that. That's a stunner. Wow. That does
look. He picked out this new wedding ring. He purchased it for me. He then said, in the new place where we live, it gets very snowy in the winter, and I want you to have an all-wheel drive vehicle. So he bought me a new car around that same time. Last year, he sent me a dozen red roses to my job for Valentine's Day.
Oh my God.
This house that I'm speaking to you from right now, I was actually on travel for work, and he had been out looking for homes, and he found this home, and he called me, and he said, I found a great house, but I think it may go fast. Is it okay if I go with the realtor to take a look at it? And he came over here with the realtor. They walked through the house and showed me on FaceTime on the phone, walked through it room by room. And I said, it looks great to me. I trust you. If you think we should do it, let's do it. Put a contract on it. A month later, we bought the house. And I saw it for the first time in person the day that we walked in as the owners of the house. Because I trusted him. He knew what I wanted.
Wow. And you bought a whole house without even seeing it because you trust your husband. Are you even the same person that was the beginning of this story that was so helpful? And Thought that your husband needed so much help, like to make every decision. Wow. That's big trust.
Big. And then this year we celebrated our 36th anniversary, and he said, I will plan this romantic. He didn't use the word romantic. He said, I will plan this weekend away for our anniversary. Romantic is my word. It was just a wonderful weekend getaway into the mountains. I didn't ask any questions. I didn't need to be part of the planning. I just packed my suitcase and got in the car. And it's beautiful.
Wow. It sounds beautiful. It sounds like an amazing marriage. 36 years. And I just love that. Like you've been married a long time when you started the intimacy skills. And you made a big transformation in your marriage, even though you probably had, those old habits were pretty well established.
Yeah.
You picked up these new ones and really made them your own. So very impressive, Lolita. I love that. And what do you think you would say to a woman who is where you were, where she's going to bed by herself, just scrolling because she's lonely, feeling abandoned,
Mhm.
and maybe also struggling through something really scary like her husband's job loss, and yeah, just feeling afraid for her family, and but she wants what you have now, where he has to buy her expensive, new wedding rings and take her on romantic getaways. And what would your tip be for her? What's the best thing she could do?
Still work on your self care. Start there. Buy The Empowered Wife. If you only can do one book, I would say that's the book. Start there. Listen to the podcast. Read the blogs. Start at your access point. Maybe you're doesn't have a lot of money right now. Start just with the free resources that are available to you, and start with self care, because you have nothing to work on your marriage if you're not in great shape. If you're depleted and running yourself ragged, start there. And then just understand that it is your femininity that draws in your husband. It is not all you do. It is not your accomplishments. It's not your intelligence. It's not the fact that you've had his children or lack thereof. It is just you making space for him to be the hero that will draw him in. And you will learn how to do that by learning these skills. And you will see, one of the things that was so hard for me is I had tried a lot of other things. I have read a lot of marriage books, and I have tried a lot of approaches. Many of those are things that I know people who are listening have tried, and they either don't work at all or they only work for a period of time, and then you're right back where you were. The intimacy skills work for your marriage, and you will see very quick results in days, but certainly within a week or two. You will see a change, and that will encourage you to go deeper. And Laura has other resources, coaches, the Adored Wife Challenge, which is every year. The Ridiculously Happy Wife Circle, which you can be a part of that. But start small and don't be overwhelmed, and just practice these skills. It's practice, which means you get up every day, and if you don't do it perfectly, you just practice them.
Yeah, I love that. Very encouraging. And what do you think if you could go back in time and talk to Lolita and tell her what you know now? What do you think you'd say to her?
Relax, not as bad as it seems. There is hope. Your husband loves you dearly, unwavering love for you. And that a day will come where you will learn how to do this in a different way that will yield the marriage you dreamed of. And in fact, my husband said that to me recently. This is probably our biggest measure of success. My husband said to me, this life we have now is the one I dreamed of when I met you when I was 13.
Right? Oh my gosh, that must have melted you. Did you feel like $1 million when he said that?
I did.
She made all the dreams come true, all the best dreams. Wow. Well, I'm very impressed, Lolita. I mean, you've done a phenomenal job just creating a wonderful, romantic, tender, fun environment in your home and really letting your husband, making your husband into your hero. And so I want to congratulate you and award you with my Best Wife Award. You richly deserve it.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for inspiring all of us by telling us how you did it, just breaking it down and explaining all the insights and awarenesses and all the times that you had to choose your faith over your fear in order to get here. Really amazing. Great job.
Well, thank you, Laura. I appreciate your work and your mission and that you make it available for all of us to be a part of it. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my delight. I'm so glad we found each other, Lolita. This is great. Thank you so much. If you enjoyed hearing the real life story of how Lolita made her relationship playful and passionate again, then subscribe to the Empowered Wife podcast. Next week's podcast is about what to do if you are tired of begging for attention from your husband and you want to stop settling for the crumbs under the table and have a seat at the banquet and feast on all his lavish attention for you. That's what we're going to talk about. And in the meantime, I hope you're having lots of fun. Today's fun fact is that John said to me very seriously yesterday, I, for one, like Roman numerals. Yeah, he said that. For more on how to make your marriage playful and passionate without his conscious effort, even if it seems hopeless right now, check this out.